All right, day 2 of the draft in the books. Always a lot of fun, day 2. Even day 3 is fun. There will be plenty of content there, but I got to do my 7 winners and 7 losers here. I will, after the whole draft is over, give sort of in-depth draft recaps for each team, so be on the lookout for that. But for now, let's go with my 7 losers, and let's just get into it. Number 1 is the Atlanta Falcons. To be honest, this list was hard to compile. I did not think there were 7 teams that I thought really did a bad job in this. The Atlanta Falcons were an easy one to put on this list. I don't know what they're doing, quite frankly. Rook Ahororo is someone right before Johnny Newton, who many people thought Johnny Newton should have been like an early first rounder. I don't know. Very much reaching for a player who I believe at that point was the biggest reach according to the consensus big board, which is something we're going to have to talk a lot about. Listen, consensus big board is not set in stone, but still, he was projected to go in round 3. You got him early round 2. That's a reach for me, and that's the main reason that that's the main issue here. They also got Braylon Trice, picks 74. That's not he was projected to go 70th. I'm fine with that, but it's really the the early second round pick that I had an issue with, and they traded up for it. I just didn't understand it. Maybe I'll be wrong. Certainly I'll be wrong about some of the things I say in this video, but I gotta give my opinion now, and now my opinion is that I don't really agree with that one. Next up, let's go to the Arizona Cardinals, who had a lot of picks in this draft class, so they had maybe some room to play around with, and I'm sure some of these picks will be hit, and some of these players I like Max Milton. Again, he was projected to go 58th. He goes 43rd. There's going to be just some of those. Like I said, this was a hard list to compile. It was hard to come up with with 7 losers. So it's really just 7 teams I think maybe didn't get the most value they potentially could have. I didn't love the Trey Benson pick. They have James Conner. I know James Conner's older. But I'm just not a fan of drafting a running back for the future. I think running backs tend to, hit the ground running, no pun intended. The pun was a little intended. Trey Benson should be really good, though. So that's just a complete positional need conversation that's honestly almost exhausting at this point to talk about, so we don't have to spend forever on it. Yeah, I didn't hate all of these picks or anything like that. I didn't think they were a disaster. Just there was a few that I thought were, maybe a bit on the reachier side, so I decided to, include on the list. That's just kind of how I viewed it, and that's why they're here. Again, they had a ton of picks to deal with. A lot of these picks I'm sure will be, I'm not going to go through each one. A lot of them I think could be good, but it was the Benson pick. Not a huge, I didn't love it for that situation, so yeah, that's why they're on the list. The Rams are on this list, and the Rams are on this list despite the fact that, listen, I actually really like the Braden Fisk move a lot. I think that's a good move, and I think he could be a really good player for them. So, trying to fill up that defensive line, getting him next to Kobe Turner, and they drafted a guy in round 1 as well. So, that's super interesting and super fun. That is not why they're on this list. And Cameron Kitchens, I think, was a solid pick as well. He was kind of projected to go around there, and I think he'll be a good player. But again, it's the running back conversation. This is a team that has, Kyren Williams, who was a really good running back for them, and is still on a couple years of cheap production. Blake Corum was not someone I was a big fan of personally. So the Rams do this. They have a lot of draft picks every year, and they'll kind of just take some flyers on some guys. Like Tutu Atwell was a guy they kind of just took a flyer on. So sometimes they really work. And again, could Corum be a good player? It's kind of the thing where, I wasn't crazy. I was kind of are these physical tools going to work at the NFL level? My podcast co-host Kyle said, well, in his plus column, he's good at playing football. And it's sometimes you got to just kind of say that. Hey, he's a good football player. So again, some of these are just I think you could have maybe done more, but I still like what you did that are still on the losers, because it's hard to come up with 7 losers. Most teams are smart and don't do dumb things. Not every team's Atlanta, right? So you got to put some on the list. This is definitely one of those. You're a loser, but not a big L here. Just other teams did better, in my opinion. The Titans make my list, despite the fact that they only had 1 pick in this section of the draft. They picked at 38 and got T'Vondre Sweat, which, listen, some people are really high on, and even I considered putting him as a top 50 player on my big board, but decided not to, though. But again, the guy went he was 73rd on the consensus big board. Like that's where people decided he should be. To me, that kind of tells me that, hey, usually that's a reach. Usually that doesn't work out. Usually when a guy is projected to go into 70s and they're drafted into 30s, they end up playing like a guy who is projected to go under 70s. That's usually what happens. Not always. There are exceptions, and again, we can point to the exceptions. I also think there are some some concerns I have with Sweat as a player. I do think there is some value in him, but I almost feel like, man, if you want a defensive tackle, trade up a couple spots and get Johnny Newton, or just take Braden Fisk, who I think is kind of in my opinion, a more complete player. Or you could have gone after some of these really good corners. Like there were still good players going right after Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry. There were good Jackson Powers Johnson, which could have helped out the offensive line. So I don't know. It wasn't my favorite selection. I don't hate it. I think he could be really good, but remains to be seen. So that's why the Titans make the list. The Jaguars do make my list as well. Again, kind of going with the consensus big board of, not saying you got bad players, but perhaps you reached. The pick they just made, Jarian Jones, a bit of a reach. He was projected to go 144. You got him at 96. That's actually a pretty significant reach. Again, once we get to near the hundreds, you can kind of reach by 50 spots, and it's actually not as crazy as when you're doing it like earlier on. But their other pick, Mason Smith, was also, they got him at 48. He was projected to go somewhat later in the draft as well. So I don't think either of these are like, he was projected to go 92. So they essentially reached on, over 40 spots for both of their players, which, again, consensus big board is not the end all be all. I'm just using it as an example to show, like, again, like I said, typically when a guy is supposed to go in the 90s, they go into 40s. They end up playing like a guy who's supposed to go in the 90s. And I have evaluated most of these players that I'm talking about on this list. Sometimes you might see that there be a reach, and I defend it. This is not those times for me, but again, I could be wrong. But for now, I'm going to put them on the list. Next is the San Francisco 49ers, which, in the third round, I got Dominic Pooney, who they got him around when he was projected to go. So that's a fine pick, and they needed offensive line help. So I actually I like that pick. I think that's a good job by them. It's just the, getting Renardo Green at pick 64 was again, let's do the consensus big board. He's projected to go 109. Felt like, hey, we need a corner. They're reaching for need. I get it. Again, this is definitely one of those, like, I'm not crushing you for what you did. I think you could even make a strong argument for why they did what they did, given they're trying to be competitive right now. I just feel like they could have maybe gotten more with the draft capital that they had. We're not able to maximize that draft capital. Even if it was the right move, you didn't maybe get what you were hoping to get going into the draft. That puts you on the losers list. Finally, the Houston Texans, which are easily, I would say, the least loserist loser on this list. But I had to pick 7. I should have mentioned there is no particular order that I'm doing this in. Simply just, the 7 losers in the order I happen to put on the list. But really, they had 2 picks. Kalen Bullock was fine. It's just like, maybe a slight reach for Bullock, but nothing like 10 spots on the consensus big board, whatever. Blake Fisher was a bit of a reach. Even that was like 21 spots. So, like, again, it was hard to find 7 losers, I thought. I felt like reaching on your 2 picks is enough for me to put you on the list. These weren't either prospects I was particularly crazy about. So, okay, fair enough. I'll put you on the list, but like barely. I think you could have, maybe going into this draft, you were hoping for slightly more value than you ended up with. It is what it is. No big deal, but I did, have to pick 7. They're number 7. That's what I think of all of this. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.